Dobar dan, dragi gosti, dobrodošli na ovu novu epizodu Libertas Talks podcasta. Ja sam Iva Bitunjac i danas je s nama ambasador Belgije u Zagrebu, William De Baetsa. Can you please introduce yourself a little, maybe?
Yes, well, good evening. I'm happy to be here for the podcast, Libertas podcast. I'm the ambassador of Belgium. I have arrived in Zagreb in August, so I have already 7 to 8 months experience in your country. And I'm happy to talk with you about bilateral relations and other matters.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. How do you see the current relations between Belgium and Croatia, and what would you consider key areas of cooperation in the future?
Well, Belgium and Croatia are not neighboring countries. We are quite at the opposite places, geographic locations in Europe. So our relations are not that strong, but overall they are quite good. One of the things I'd like to say is that the relationship between our countries, the official relations between the countries, is quite old, older than many people know or may think. As a matter of fact, during the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Belgium was an industrial power and always looking for export markets. So Belgium opened consulates all over the world and also in Croatia, mainly in the port cities like Rijeka, Šibenik, Dubrovnik. So these official relations were established already at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. Then afterwards, of course, we know the history of Europe. We went through 2 world wars, then there was the communism era, the rise and the fall of communism, the war of the 90s, and then now, of course, we have the European Union and the NATO. We are both countries members of these 2 international organizations. And so we share now the same values and we work together to the same goals. So the relations are very good, I would say, but can be stronger. We can intensify these relationships. We are different also because we are geographically different and we have a different history. So that also makes that we still can intensify and strengthen these relations.
Okay.
You asked also about the possibilities to strengthen them. Yes, I think that we can talk about that as well. In my opinion, there is a lot that we can do. Mm-hmm. As like-minded countries, there are many areas where we can work together, mm-hmm. be it in politics, business, culture, and so on. Course,
yeah. Well, I didn't know that Belgium and Croatia have this old history, let's say, between them, the official relations that started a long time ago. So thank you for this information. And speaking of these relations, what are your assessments of the economic cooperation between Belgium and Croatia, and what are some opportunities that we can use to strengthen them?
Well, again, we are not neighboring countries, and most of the time the strongest economic relations are with neighboring countries. So for Belgium, the strongest economic partners are Germany, France, the Netherlands. Of course, as we are quite far away, we don't have that intense trade relationship. We don't have that many investments, but still we belong both to the European Union, to the single market, which means that we have some trade and it's always growing. I can give you some figures. In fact, I looked it up, and at this moment, Belgium is the 12th investor in Croatia. It's the 11th country of origin for the imports in Croatia and as a supplier, and then we are the 13th country of destination of exports from Croatia. So that is not too bad for Croatia. On the other hand, for Belgium, Croatia is the 57th client of our export, mm-hmm. and the 92nd supplier. So there is still a lot that we can do to intensify that trade relationship. But I think we should have a look at where both countries are strong at. and then identify these areas in which we excel and start working on intensifying, on strengthening the relations in these specific areas. And there are some areas that would immediately come into my mind, and that is, for example, logistics. With ports, we are both blessed having access to the sea. In Belgium, only 67 kilometers. In Croatia, way more. Yeah. But we have access to the sea, so we are seafaring countries, we are trading countries. So that means that
that can be an area where...
Exactly. So the shipping and the logistics, that's probably an area where we can share know-how and where we can strengthen our cooperation. There are some others, for example, green energy. And we know all how important that is, especially in the Green Deal and the transition to green energy. We have a lot of know-how, but we don't have the resources that you have. Croatia has the sun, has the water, has the wind. We have the wind, basically. But we also have know-how. We can produce, we can help Croatia producing green energy as well. So that's probably one of these niche also where we can work together. We have something in common, in fact, also, that is that Belgium can be a supplier for green energy in the northwest of Europe, and Croatia can be the supplier of green energy in the southeast of Europe. Not only with what we produce ourselves, but also with the import, for example, of green hydrogen. And Belgium is really pioneering in that. We are one of the firsts in the world when it comes to hydrogen, green hydrogen. And we are doing transforming our the pipelines for the gas, because, as you know, Belgium is an entry point for a lot of gas in northwest Europe. We are transforming these pipelines for dual use, that they will also be usable for green hydrogen. So when now we are exporting a lot of gas that we receive to, for example, Germany, where the heavy industry is, in the future we can do the same but with green hydrogen. Okay. You have the island of Kirk, where you have the LNG terminal, and that in the future will also be an entry point for green hydrogen, for sure. And then there are some other areas, I think, where we can cooperate. You have the pharmaceutical industry, the IT industry. These are areas where Croatia is doing quite well and growing and developing. And then I also, when I traveled and I met some people, there were some other specific niche areas where we probably can also do some things together. And that is, for example, the gaming, the e-gaming, or the how do you say that, the high-tech enhanced cultural experiences with virtual reality tourism that you can combine with virtual reality. So these are specific areas where we probably can share a lot of know-how and work together. And then personally, I believe that the basis for everything is the exchange, the people's exchange, people-to-people contact. And I think that that's something where we probably should also do some efforts, that is having more Croatians coming to Belgium, study, work, live there, and the way around, more Belgians.
For tourism and cultural purpose,
Yeah, and also for business purposes, because when you live in a country, or when you study in a country and you go back to your home country, when you want to go international, you will automatically go back to the country that you know. So that's why I'm really in favor of strengthening these people-to-people exchanges.
Okay, so I think I speak in the name of all people when I say that we would love to see some more collaboration between Belgium and Croatia. And now, as the ambassador of Belgium in Croatia, can you tell us what is Belgium's perspective on Croatia's role in the European Union and the region?
Yeah, that is indeed a very good question, especially because Croatia is the youngest member of the European Union. But Croatia succeeded in joining very fast, in fact, the Eurozone and the Schengen area. So that also shows, that says a lot about how Croatia sees itself in the European context, and how seriously the country works for securing its position in that common house that is the European Union. At the same time, Croatia brings also in the European Union experience that most of the countries don't have or didn't have for quite a while, and that is war. Unfortunately, and during the 90s, there was a war in this region in this part of Europe, and Croatia lived it immediately. But it also helps. I think it brings a certain expertise and experiences.
Another point of view.
And that especially that are very useful in these days. These days when we see that there is again a war in Europe, and I think that the experience of Croatia can help the European Union also to put everything in the right perspective.
Yeah, of course.
And then especially when we talk about what, but not only, but also especially what has to happen after the war. Because we have to demine a country. It took 30 years for Croatia to demine the entire country. And as long as that is not done, you cannot really rebuild or develop the country. So now we will face the same problem in Ukraine. Your experience on another scale, but still that experience is invaluable. And I think that that's also one of the things that Croatia can bring to the European Union. Then, of course, you have the whole region, and there is still a part of Europe that is not part of the European Union. Now we have a number of candidates in this region. The Western Balkan. And Croatia is doing a great job helping these countries also to join our common house. Not only advocating in the European Union for their accession, but also helping them practically on the field, I would say, to prepare for the accession. So that is also a great job that Croatia is doing, and I think that we really should appreciate that as other European member states.
So we can say that the Western Balkan Summit during the Croatian presidency at the European Union was a success?
Absolutely. Well, at least during that summit, two countries could start their accession talks. More recently, Bosnia-Herzegovina joined also the group of countries that is negotiating with the European Union. So, of course, that is not enough, but we all know that how much effort Croatia is putting in helping these countries to preparing themselves to the accession.
Okay, so let's talk now about another actual thematic in the European Union. You talked a little about it before, the challenges such as climate change and migration. How does Belgium view them, and what role does it see for cooperation between Belgium and Croatia in addressing these issues?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Migration and climate.
It's very complex, but well, you know, we have now the presidency of the Council of the European Union for the 13th time, by the way, and in these challenging times, in fact, our presidency has the motto, protect, strengthen and prepare. Now, that is a summary of our approach to address these current global challenges, including climate change and migration, as you just mentioned. Now, in terms of addressing the climate change, our presidency is giving priorities to a green and a just transition, because it's not enough to have that green transition. We also need to have the population following these ambitions. And then this is crucial. In fact, we don't think enough about it, but in fact, it's a triple crisis. We have the climate change, but we have also pollution, and what we talk a little bit less about is the loss in our biodiversity. So that is dramatic. We really have to work on that, and that's why we fully support that ambitious agenda of the EU, because there is really a sense of urgency among our European leaders, and we all have to follow that. Of course, fighting the climate change shouldn't jeopardize our economic growth and the prosperity of the continent. So we have to find the good balances, and we have to include the whole population, motivate the people to follow us in that. When it comes to migration, well, as you know, the Migration Pact has been decided in the European Union, and now we have to implement all these measures. For our presidency, we work on the implementation, and it gives us also the possibility to focus on that external dimension that is so important for the Migration Pact, for migration and asylum. So that involves also enhancing the cooperation with some African countries where people come from, and that is, in fact, it's vital. It is vital for managing all these migration movements, and to do it in a humane way. Mm-hmm. That is very important for the Belgian presidency as well, is that we try to limit the migration waves, but on a humane way. We have to take into account the aspect of our humanity in all these the reasons why people move, in fact. Now, there is, of course, a role for Croatia in all this. I think there are many opportunities to cooperate with Croatia. We touched upon the role that Croatia can play in the energy transition, with all the potential it has to produce green energy, but also as an entry point for green energy. So energy transition, be it production or transition of energy, is probably a role for Croatia in this region. But also for the implementation of the Migration Pact, Croatia has a big role to play, and not at least because Croatia has such long borders, sea border and land border, external border of the European Union. So Croatia has really a critical position in the European Union and for the implementation of the Migration Pact. Both our countries are committed to these ambitious programs, both in the fight against climate change as in the change of the migration flows. And I think that by combining our forces, we can of course contribute significantly to these purposes.
So, in your opinion, as the end of the Belgian presidency is approaching, do you think that these objectives that you're talking about, migration, climate change, do you think that it has been achieved, or do you think that more could have been done?
We can always do more.
Of course, yeah.
But I think that we can be quite proud of our results, because we have to work with 27 member states, with 27 different opinions. Well, not always totally different, but there are still some nuances, some little or big differences in viewpoints. And I think that we reached a consensus in many of these areas, and in fact we advanced quite well in the legislative agenda during a limited time. Because this is also a very special presidency. Instead of having the full 6 months to work on legislation, we only had a little bit more than 3 months because of the elections that are coming up. So the European Parliament was dissolved at the beginning of April somewhere. So we only had a bit more than 3 months to pass all this legislation, and we realized, in fact, our ambitious agenda.
Okay. So now another thematic, how does the Belgian government promote culture and education in Croatia, and how does this impact bilateral relations between our countries?
Yes, well, first of all, I have to explain you that in Belgium, culture and education are not the competences of the national government, of the federal government. Basically, it is a competence of the communities, of the regional governments, for the Flemish-speaking part of the country, and for the French-speaking part of the country, and then also for that tiny part of the German-speaking community in Belgium. So basically, they have a role in it's their policy, how they are going to promote culture, how they organize education, and how do they do that on the international field as well. But of course, when you see the whole, that helps in the relationship between both our countries. They all place a strong emphasis on promoting cultural and educational exchanges and recognizing, of course, that these areas are vital pillars for strengthening our bilateral relations. The cultural diversity in our country. We have that also in common. Belgium is a diverse country. We have 3 different languages, but we are really on the border of the Germanic culture and the Latin culture. Croatia also has diversity. Croatia has a Mediterranean influence, has a Central European influence, and has a Slavic influence. So, in fact, we are both rich countries when it comes to our cultural diversity. And that's probably a point where we can also find some common ground and that we can work together on. Now, in the field of education, Belgium supports academic partnerships and exchange programs with Croatian universities and research centers. And of course, these initiatives aim at providing for the students and academics of both countries some collaboration opportunities and to do research together and participating in exchange programs and attend seminars, conferences, workshops. And these should focus on the shared interests and challenges and quite
internships.
Often... And internships, yes. I think we have some living examples of these kind of exchanges. And quite often, you can also see it in a European framework, because we have the Horizon program of the European Union, and they work with people, with academics from all over Europe, even outside Europe. So Europe is also a factor. I said our regional governments, but we also have always a red line in everything we do, the European Union as well.
Okay, like we talked about it before, one of the great achievements of the Croatian presidency was the Western Balkan Summit. How does Belgium view, so we talked about the Croatia's role in the European Union, but the Croatia's role in the EU enlargement process, especially now that we're talking about, like you said, the negotiations with Albania, with Bosnia and Herzegovina. So how do you see Croatia's role in all that?
Well, first of all, we have to say that enlargement has proven to be good for the European Union. It has strengthened the European Union. 10 days ago, we celebrated the first of the month, we celebrated the entry of 10 countries in the European Union 20 years ago. When you evaluate today what the result and the outcome was of that, it is only positive. There was some fear at the beginning that these countries were perhaps not prepared, that the gap between the West and the new countries, the member countries, the new member countries or candidates, better said, at that time was too big, that it wouldn't work, but now we can say it has strengthened the European Union. And that is also Belgium's position for the further enlargement of the European Union. It has to strengthen the European Union. So Belgium favors including more countries, especially from the Western Balkan, in the European Union. But of course, we also say we don't have to rush for that. It must be merits-based, and we have to prepare these countries. Now, that also means that these candidate countries have some responsibilities. It goes both ways, and we can want them in, but they have to want coming in, and they have to prepare themselves for that as well. And that's where Croatia can play the bigger role. As I said before, helping these countries, preparing to work to the acquis. And basically, these are the minimal criteria, the Copenhagen criteria nowadays for entering, so that at least they prepare themselves in their laws and regulations, implementations, so that they come closer to what we have in common in European Union, and that they can join smoothly in European Union. That's one thing, and then on the other hand, of course, the experience and the knowledge about that region, that's something Croatia has that we, for example, at totally other side of the European Union, we don't have it in the same way. So I think that's really the most important role for Croatia in the enlargement process.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you about another Belgian perspective. So what are Belgium's perspectives and policies regarding security and defense at the European level? And how might these policies affect cooperation with Croatia?
Yeah, that's another topic of our Belgian presidency. That's bringing security and defense at the European level. Now, we also have foreign policy goals, and that's one of the reasons why we need this more common defense and security policy, European defense and security policy. But at the same time, we also want to play in the multilateral and the rules-based world. So we have to see it also, we have to approach it in a comprehensive way. We are talking about security and defense, but we have to include all areas in that, also our economic assets. Not only military capabilities, but also what we call the soft power capabilities that we have. And of course, our development cooperation and humanitarian assistance is also part of our security policy. That is the big principle. At the same time, we watch now a war on our continent. Since the beginning of the 90s, we all thought we won't have a war anymore on our continent. So we were quite confident we had that peace dividend, and so we wouldn't invest too much anymore in defense. Military, we could reduce it, but with the Russian aggression in Ukraine, we suddenly realized that in fact peace is not a given. It's something that you have to work on every day. You have to prepare yourself for a worse scenario. So suddenly all European countries have invested more in their defense.
And they weren't prepared for that, yeah.
And indeed, we were not prepared. For example, we want to give support to Ukraine, which is very important, also for our presidency. And in fact, it has also been one of our ambitions during the presidency, that is maintaining the full support to Ukraine. Of course, on a consensual basis, we must all agree upon that. And of course, not all countries had the same opinions about the level of cooperation or with what means and so on. But at the end, we have the Ukraine fund that is available now for the assistance, the financial means and the military assistance. But as you said, we were not prepared for that. And for example, when all the individual countries, member states, sent weapons and ammunition to Ukraine, suddenly we saw that we didn't have stocks anymore for ourselves. And there you see also one of the industrial weaknesses of the European Union. So we have to strengthen also our defense industry so that we can be more, that we have some autonomy as a European Union, that we don't depend too much on others.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
On the other hand, of course, we also see that NATO remains the main security pillar for Europe. So we will always try to work in a North Atlantic context. But I spoke about the war in Ukraine, but at the same time we also have the tensions and the war in the Middle East. That's one of the other threats for Europe as well, because that has a direct impact on Europe. We have to prepare ourselves for that as well. for example, our trade was interrupted because of the attacks in the Red Sea. Mm-hmm. We sent naval assets to the Red Sea to guarantee free shipping in the Red Sea. And then, of course, what is happening in Gaza has also a domestic impact because it's polarizing so much our societies. Mm-hmm. And these are new scenarios. We were not prepared to that. Mm-hmm. We have to adjust. The European Union as a whole has to adjust, and the member states, of course, have their main role in this.
Okay, so thank you for answering all these questions. And now I have just one last question for you. It's not about Belgium or Croatia, it's just your personal advice. So what advice do you have for young students that are going into foreign policy and future diplomats?
I will give, of course, my personal opinion based on my personal experiences. So, first of all, you have to do what you love. Mm-hmm. You have to do it with passion. Secondly, going in foreign service, diplomacy, is not a normal job. It's a lifestyle, it's a mindset, and it impacts not only one person, but also a whole family. Mm-hmm. So you have to take that into account. But it's a fantastic job. And then, from my experience, I also had a life before being a diplomat. Mm-hmm. And I think it's quite interesting to have an experience before entering foreign service, because that experience will also help. Some field experience before you enter foreign service is very useful. But as I said, you have to do it with passion. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's perhaps not the right job.
So thank you very much for your precious advice that I'm sure will help a lot of people. And thank you for being with us today and to answering all of our questions. So, doviđenja, hvala što ste slušali ovu epizodu Libertas podcasta i vidimo se uskoro, nadam se.